This is the On the Pony Express podcast, part of the On3 network. Check out all the SMU coverage you need at ontheponyexpress.com. Now, here's your host, Billy Embody.
1, 2, 3, let me go.
Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the On the Pony Express podcast. I am Billy Embody. Thanks for joining us. We're going to get to Hayden Howerton breaking down SMU's win over Houston Christian in just a second. But first, we are presented by our friends at StatusJet, statusjet.com. You've got to reach out to David Henry and his team. I saw him on Saturday, SMU beating up on Houston Christian. We caught up a little bit, and he's very excited to offer everybody that Pony Up ACC discount on your round trip flight with our friends at statusjet.com. Fly private, learn about all the options they have at their website, big plane, small plane, helicopter, whatever you want to get you there from point A to point B in with that level of luxury that you'd expect. They can get you that discount. They've got all the price ranges all done up, all ready for you guys for all of those trips to ACC country that are coming up for the Mustangs. So reach out to StatusJet today. They're proud supporters of SMU Athletics and the On the Pony Express podcast. Like I said, Hayden Howerton is going to join us in just a few minutes, but wanted to share some additional notes and news on the Mustangs, as Tuesday is the first day we got to look at the Mustangs since coming off of that 59-7 win over Houston Christian on Saturday. And SMU is back inside the Armstrong Fieldhouse as well to get that practice going. A quick reminder, guys, on the ponyexpress.com subscribers, complimentary wine tasting Wednesday evening. Go to ontheponyexpress.com. Our friends at Epic Wines are doing it big. If you want to join us, spots are still available. Email me, Billy, Billy, .embody, EMBODY at on3.com to get in Armstrong Fieldhouse tomorrow evening. We'll get you on the list. Complimentary wine tasting and live podcast with myself, Bill Armstrong, and chairman of SMU's board, David Miller. Big guest for us Wednesday evening. But back to practice Tuesday morning inside Armstrong Fieldhouse. SMU did have some running backs nicked up, and that's really where the position across the country is at. You know, a lot of nicked up running backs. Jaden Ott, the Cal running back, left his game this weekend nicked up, so that'll be something to watch as Cal goes to Auburn as well. But for SMU, they're going to get Jalen Knighton back, Rhett Lashley said on Tuesday. He was held out of this past week's game, just kind of out of precaution, and now he'll be suiting up against BYU. And it's a good thing they held him out because SMU running back LJ Johnson is nicked up. Rhett Lashley didn't disclose his injury, but he was in a red non-contact jersey on Tuesday at practice. And so that'll be something to watch for SMU as they, that's really their big bruising running back this year. And so for LJ Johnson to get nicked up early in the year, it's unfortunate for him. He kind of dealt with this last year right around this time. And so I don't know what it is. Again, Rhett Lashley didn't disclose it, but he was in a red non-contact jersey. I don't know if that means he practiced or not, but he is considered day-to-day per Rhett Lashley. And then Zane Miners, former walk-on running back for SMU, got hit real hard by Houston Christian on, I believe, his first run of the game, maybe his second, but that did put him out for the rest of the game. He was in a knee brace at practice. I'm not sure if he practiced or not, and Rhett Lashley didn't disclose his situation, but SMU, at least having him there at practice, he was in uniform, is a good sign. It was a heavy knee brace. I'm not sure if he practiced, but that was a good thing to at least see him out there. So the running back position is one that is certainly premium when it comes to depth. Kamar Wheaton's already out for the season, but Brashard Smith has shown that tough, explosive running style, and that is something that SMU can lean on. And I think it's a good opportunity for him to continue to show that he can be the workhorse. You know, he's a tough kid. He's made the transition from that slot receiver spot to the running back position, and he's really flourished. 100-yard rushing game against Houston Christian. He's going to look to a tougher test against BYU on Friday, but he's going to look to continue his solid rushing showing. And then you'll have Jalen Knighton available. And then you've got to give flowers to Derek McFall, the true freshman, who might end up playing his way out of that red shirt. 16 carries, 69 yards, and a touchdown on his second career carry, 4.3 yards per carry. Brashard Smith averaged 12. Big clip for Brashard there against Houston Christian. But Derek McFall is probably going to earn time this weekend. It's just a reality. If you have Brashard Smith, if you have Jalen Knighton, if you want to work somebody in to take the load off, and if LJ's too dinged up to play, or if he's, they're trying to be careful with him, then Derek McFall, he's still got those games available to keep for his red shirt. He could factor in, and he showed that explosiveness that you want to see. So that is the update on the SMU running backs. Moochie Dixon, the wide receiver that was held out of SMU's win over Houston Christian, is expected to be available this week, as will Andrew Chamblee, the former Arkansas transfer and all-SEC freshman. Got his first action as an SMU offensive lineman on Saturday night. He'll be available again on Friday. He was a little sore, Rhett Lashley said, but he settled in well and played well for SMU at that right tackle spot after Justin Osborne got a few series, and then they got him out of there. And that gave Andrew Chamblee a chance to really settle in to that offensive line that had that new look to it this week. And we'll talk about that with Hayden in just a few moments when it comes to what SMU is getting into as far as the offensive line and where that's going and why it's so important against BYU, as they are a tough, talented group. But SMU is going to likely have two quarterbacks out there against BYU. Rhett Lashley saying Preston Stone is the starter, but he thinks you'll see more of Kevin Jennings as well this weekend. So that continues to be a storyline for SMU as they play two quarterbacks, and we'll see how the game goes. But biggest thing for me, and I'll say it on the pod later this week, SMU has to start fast this week. BYU is a team that is mature. They're physical. If SMU starts slow and they're kind of in a dogfight, SMU is going to need to find a way to start fast, because BYU can feed off of that if they don't and build confidence. And they've got a quarterback who's making his sixth career start against SMU now in Jake Retzlaff. So he's coming off his fifth career start. He threw for over 300 yards against Southern Illinois. But, SMU, these slow starts, these first 2 weeks, even Houston Christian, you go 3 and out, give up a couple first downs against that Houston Christian offense. It's not what the doctor is ordering for BYU. They've got to get out to a fast start this week against BYU. It's not a team that I feel like you can come back from double digit down if you're messing around and you're not being the team that you should be. And I'll say this, Rhett Lashley talked about, his quote was, and I thought it was interesting because one, he could talk about the board. He could talk about anybody out there. He could talk about ESPN picking SMU or us in his vantage point as, dark horses to win the ACC. But here's what he said. He talked about this BYU team, and he said, I'm trying to find it. Sorry. He said on the run of 10 straight power conference matchups. And so I'll kind of go through this and cherry pick some of it. But he said, I think there's been a lot of buzz around our program, which is great. There's a lot of overzealous people out there prognosticating what we're supposed to do. There's no pressure on us. We're not supposed to win these games, right? If you look at the history, 4 teams that won the Big 12 last year, blah, blah, none of them had a winning record. SMU hasn't had many opportunities to get a power conference win, but they haven't had a home power conference win since 2010, which is true. That game, I can't even recall what it was, honestly. That was my freshman year, and SMU lost to BYU or to TCU in that one, so I'll have to look that one up. But SMU hasn't, had this many opportunities in one season. But Rhett Lashley said, we need to relax and go play. I think we've got a good team. We're not there yet. Just into week 3, we're still in that early season process where you're trying to figure out your identity, where you're going to be on both sides of the ball. We faced adversity early in the season, responded well. But some of these kinds of things, kind of baffling to him. We're the underdog every week. Doesn't matter what the line says. We're not supposed to come in and beat everybody. Now, on the flip side, our guys are confident. I think they know that we can compete at this level. I think they feel good that we belong. So we have to go out and show that, but there's no pressure on us, only the pressure we put on ourselves. And I think he ended up with a roundabout way of saying, look, all of this, SMU being favored by double digits over BYU, the early line, I would imagine for SMU TCU, unless SMU loses to BYU, is probably going to be SMU being favored. Just at home, TCU didn't look that great against Stanford. We'll see how they look this week. And then certainly see how TCU looks against UCF. But that would be my guess, is Vegas is probably going to have SMU as a slight favorite over TCU. And that doesn't mean I'm ready to pick SMU either. But there is some of this where SMU had a really good football team last year. They beat who they were supposed to beat. This year, there are some lines and there are some rankings and there are some things that SMU is supposed to beat some of these teams on their schedule. And as the college football season unfolds, like, I still don't think SMU is beating Florida State. I think they match up really well. It wouldn't shock me. But there are some absolute freak shows on the Florida State team that matchup-wise make it really tough on SMU, just athlete to athlete. Scheme, all the other things that are presenting themselves with Florida State right now, I think SMU matches up really well. But that doesn't mean that SMU is going to go out and beat them. There are other opportunities like a Duke, like a Virginia, that I think SMU should be favored and they should win. And quite frankly, they should be favored against the Stanford and things like that. But Rhett Lashley is trying to, I think, reel all of that in, because we're 2 weeks into this season. And I'll end on this because I don't want to go into a long deal. But we're 2 weeks into following the 2024 SMU Mustangs. And quite frankly, I don't know anything about this offense because they haven't really played well outside of one quarter against Nevada. And it's tough to take anything away from Houston Christian, with all due respect to Houston Christian. I think there are some little things offensively that we think we know. Brashard Smith could be really good. I think the new look offensive line could fix some things. Preston Stone, when he's on, he's very good. Kevin Jennings might have more upside for SMU's offense and making it be that offense that it can be. RJ Maryland's a freak. They don't have a wide receiver who stepped up yet. Defensively, I think SMU is a much better football team than people are giving it credit for. They faced a bad matchup against Nevada with a new coaching staff that threw a bunch of different things at them. And they adjusted, and they should have shut them out in the second half, if not for a phantom spitting call against Nevada. And then they played really well against Houston Christian for the most part. But we have no idea what this team really is. We're going to find out on Friday night. And that's the tough part about it. And so I think Rhett's point, and I don't know, I didn't talk to him afterwards about it or anything like that, but I think Rhett's point is everybody settle down, including his team. Because when SMU has failed under Rhett Lashley to get a win, in my opinion, they've come into games overhyped. They've come into games hyping themselves up too much. They've, in hockey, we call it, you're squeezing the stick too hard. You're too tense. And after the last 2 years with Rhett Lashley being at the helm, and really, I mean, all of November when Sonny Dykes was at SMU did not handle those situations well at all. With Rhett Lashley, they've gotten better as the season has unfolded. And they're going to need to do that again this year. But he is clearly, if his players listen to any of that, trying to get out ahead of, we've got to settle down and we've got to play our brand of football. Can't lose contain as defensive ends. We can't start flustered and anxious offensively. We can't put too much pressure on ourselves, to make plays. When SMU's defense is at its best, they're playing within their system. They're relying on every single person doing their job, all 11, and all the guys that rotate in beyond that. Offensively, SMU is very, very good when they don't beat themselves. They don't miss open passes, when they don't drop passes they should catch, when they don't tiptoe around their line of scrimmage when they're running the football, when their offensive linemen aren't holding. SMU's offense gets it in its own way in those ways. And a lot of that can be tied back to tension. And I think Red is trying to make the statement that, hey, everyone talking about our team, we haven't proven anything. We don't really deserve anything in that sense. But his group is confident that they can compete week in, week out. And so our board was having a little bit of a field day with it, where a few people are saying, well, of course, he's trying to drum down expectations. It's silly. We don't spend enough money and we don't do this. We don't do that. Yeah, sure. If you want to take him exactly at what his word was, which Rhett's pretty like says what he means, but I just don't buy that he's trying to ramp down expectations on this program. Like from the outside, he's trying to say, look, we've got to go out and prove this. There's no pressure on us to prove this because everyone else who's been in our situation hasn't proven that it's possible. But we've got a good team. We've got to go out, relax, and play SMU football. And it's got to start this week. If it doesn't, there needs to be some sort of changes. I'm not trying to get ahead on that stuff, but they've got to start fast, and it starts with the offense. And that's the reality. The defense usually holds up its end of the bargain early on. So I'm very intrigued to see how SMU starts this week. But for all the, Rhett's trying to tamper expectations and basically saying, SMU shouldn't be favored at all the rest of the way, like, don't take it so seriously. He is trying to say that they have not won any of these games yet since he's been here. I mean, they haven't beat TCU. They lost to BYU in their bowl game. They lost to BC in their bowl game. They lost to Oklahoma. They lost at Maryland. They haven't been able to do it. And so they've got to get over the hump. And that is what this type of a season is about. They've got the group that is confident they can do it and deliver it, but they've got to show it. And that's the next step for this SMU football team. So before we get to our conversation with Hayden Howerton, breaking down SMU Houston Christian and also looking around the country, I got to remind you guys, we are presented by our friends at AKM Turf and Greens. Go to akmturfandgreens.com. They have some incredible work that they've been doing lately. McKinney Christian Academy totally revamped their recess area. If you know a school, if you know a church that could use this type of a large area of the finest turf you can find, reach out to our friends at akmturfandgreens.com, info@akmturfandgreens.com. Use code PONYUP for $500 off your project. And hey, if it's a massive one, I'm sure we can work something out with our friends at AKM Turf and Greens, but they can handle any project, whether it be recess area, whether it be turning your yard into the backyard of your dreams. That's where AKM Turf and Greens can come into the fold and really help you out. And so reach out to Alex Carpenter and his team. He's a former professional golfer. He knows his stuff on this, and you can have your backyard become your own personal putting green or chipping area or just a place to entertain. Turn your backyard into that weed-infested backyard into a truly work of art backyard putting, chipping green for you to entertain all your friends and family at. So code PONYUP for $500 off your project. Go to akmturfandgreens.com today. And joining us now on the Pony Express podcast, happy to have Hayden Howerton back with us, as he will be all season long. Hayden, it was a great week one of college football, depending on who you were rooting for. SMU got the win. An interesting weekend in college football, but let's focus on the Ponies here. And they got it done 59-7 over Houston Christian. We'll talk about some of the other games around the country in a little bit with you. But what were your main overall takeaways from what was a dominant showing in Ford Stadium?
Man, it was good to get back in the win column for sure. It was good for us to put on a good showing after a little bit of a slow start in week 0. My keys to the game that I had this past week were start fast, and I think overall we did that. It was 28-0 in the first quarter. So I thought they did a nice job of coming out. They looked like the most excited team to play on Saturday, which was another one of my keys. I think the new facility and getting the first run out and the new Ford Stadium look definitely helped with that. You could feel the energy in the crowd. You could feel the energy with the team. And it was really, really awesome to watch them get going. And then lastly, my key was to get both quarterbacks going and get some more confidence in that room. And I think it's safe to say that they both played well, and we'll break that down even more here in a minute. But it was good to see both Preston and Kevin, get back to what looked like their usual selves.
What does a game like this mean for a team? Like, how much do you take away from it as a player? Do you obviously try to treat everybody the same, but that you're hoping to play a bunch of people. You want to come out crisp. How do you kind of lock in? Because games like this can be kind of hard.
It's unfortunately it's a trap game, especially before a short week against BYU coming up. I thought before the game Houston Christian was going to be better than what they showed. I mean, what they showed on Saturday is they did not look like a good football team, unfortunately. So I'm happy that SMU didn't stoop to the level of their competition and they were able to play at a high level. And you needed a big performance like this in a game where you were able to pull your starters in the second half to keep guys fresh and keep them ready to go. But when you're looking ahead, you have to treat everybody the same. That's exactly right. You can't look at BYU any different than you're going to look at Florida State, and you can't look at Houston Christian any different than you're going to look at TCU. It's just the preparation is always going to be the same as far as your process. How you come in on Sunday after the previous week, you're getting your recovery. Monday on the off day, you're doing your extra lift. You're getting maybe a little extra treatment, and then going out and attacking Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday walkthrough, Friday run through, and then just getting ready to go on Saturday. It's always going to be try to keep it as similar as you can. Short week, you're going to take away a day somewhere in there, but you always got to treat it the same.
For me, when I was watching this game and got a couple different angles at it throughout the home opener, but SMU's offensive line, they started a new five, which we kind of thought they were toying around with last week, and we didn't know if they would go through with it. They did. Ja'Kai Clark at center. PJ Williams was at left tackle, and then they kind of rotated the guards consistently. They had Justin Osborne out at right tackle before Andrew Chamblee made his SMU debut. I felt like that was a much more natural-looking group than what was at Nevada, which was your first game of the season. I didn't know if they were going to pull the chute that quickly. It was kind of apparent in practice they were looking at doing that. But I felt like for me, the offensive line was the biggest takeaway. Still things to clean up, like you said in your notes when we were trading them before the show. But I feel like the offensive line was probably one of the bigger positives in a sense, because not only did they keep Preston Stone, Kevin Jennings, Keldrick Luster clean, they rushed for well over 300 yards.
Right, you said it. 369 rushing yards, 6.8 yards per rush. Was really happy to see that. I thought Savion Byrd coming in at left guard, Ja'Kai Clark at center, and J.O. out at right tackle. I think they all looked pretty natural at those spots. I think J.O. especially, that was an impressive showing for him as what really is a shorter tackle for this league. He's able to play with a lot of natural leverage. He has really tight hands, and he's very explosive in his pass rush sets. So to quote Coach Lashley, he said, "We feel really good that that's the five." And so I would agree. I think that's who you have to roll with going forward. But when we talk about rotational with the guards and getting Andrew Chamblee in there, I think that's for the benefit of this O-line in the long term. You're going to get guys where at the end of the game, if you play every snap, you're on snap 80 plus. But if you're rotating guys in the fourth quarter, man, you only have a half or 2/3 of a game on your body. You're going to be a lot more fresh when you need it, whether that's a 4-minute situation where, hey, we know we're going to have to run the football and we've got to be really good here, or in a 2-minute situation to win the game where it's one-on-ones with that defensive end and he's got his ears pinned back. Hey, I'm fresh. I haven't taken as many reps as I might have otherwise. And you're able to just go out and perform a little bit better. And I think that'll lead to long-term success in the season when you can take reps off of guys. I did it my senior year. Cam Irvin was a guy that we're really great friends now, and we were really great friends there. We would rotate series. I would take 3, and then he would come in for 1 and give me a spell. And I would be able to be fresher later in the series and then later in the season, which really played to my benefit.
And for me, watching Savion Byrd, I thought he was one of the more impressive players. Didn't play week 1 or game 1, was back in action in week 1, game 2. And he kind of displayed a little bit of an edge. He kind of had that ticked off mentality that as a former blue chip player, you kind of hoped, would come along. And again, it's consistency for Savion. I think that's the biggest thing for him. And, I was really impressed with what he brought to the table. And I think this new look line gives SMU so many different options at the guard position. Getting Andrew Chamblee back does, give them somebody with length, starting experience, SEC all freshman, all of those things at tackle. And when you pair that with Justin Osborne, and even if Chamblee can, spell PJ at times, then you're looking at that guard rotation, which is really solid. Just 2 deep and maybe even 3 deep at certain spots when you have Logan Parr, Nate Anderson, Savion Byrd, Ben Sparks, and maybe I'm forgetting one, but It's a good situation now. They've kind of fixed it now that everyone is back and playing.
For sure. They all bring something different to the table. Logan and Ben are very downhill guys, and I think that Savion is our Dennis Rodman. That's what we joked about in the spring. I mean, he's got a little bit of a rough edge to him at times, but Coach Justice has done a good job of smoothing that out and getting him on the same page as everyone else from a technique perspective. We're able to get his feet corrected. He played at some tackle and some guard at Oklahoma, so we were just trying to find a spot for him. But he's one of those guys, you just got to let him go to work, man. He's such a freak athlete that he's going to be able to go out and get it done. It just might be a little unorthodox at times. And if we can pair his athleticism with great technique, he's going to be a great offensive lineman for us. I thought we also looked really good in short yardage in the goal line situations.
Yeah, I think the short yardage has probably been one of the bigger takeaways for me during the course of the early part of the season. I mean, Nevada was much better, and they showed that by beating Troy over the weekend than people give them credit for. But Houston Christian, you would hope that they would be rolling in the short yardage. I felt like those situations, the first two games, have been really good for SMU. They've been kind of a mixed bag here and there. You almost like last year, it was like, all right, well, Tyler Veen, you got to come in and you got to get 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, whatever it is. This year, it just seems like they're kind of rolling through it, which is nice. They still got to get a little bit more consistent in the run game overall. But when you have somebody like Brashard Smith, he's been making a ton of plays, over 100 yards on the ground. He just looks how a running back should look in terms of finishing runs. He's always twisting and turning, looking for those extra opportunities to fall forward. I love the way he runs with a passion.
For sure. Brashard, it takes multiple guys to bring him down, which has been really fun to watch. During the game, one of my notes I wrote down is, man, it seems like he gets 5+ every time he touches the ball, and
Yeah.
he was over 10 a carry this past game, which was really fun to watch. Going back to your short yardage and red zone, just something I want to talk about. We have to be able to run the football in the red zone. It is really hard to throw the football in the red zone because your field shrinks. Your safeties are going to be a lot lower than when you are out in the open field. Your linebackers are going to be closest to your deepest routes, at least closer than they would be otherwise. And so for you to be able to run the ball and keep them balanced, that's what we're really going to have to do, especially when, it gets to crunch time against a big opponent later in the season where we need it to possibly get some kind of conference championship berth or something like that, because that's what we're all hoping for, right? But I think that as long as we're able to keep doing that, we're going to be able to have a lot of success in the game.
I completely agree with you. And look, with the pass protection, 2 straight games, no sacks allowed by this offensive line. And for these quarterbacks to operate and have the best chance to move the offense up and down the field, that's got to be the case. And there are times when there's pressures allowed. And Kevin had an unbelievable scramble on one of those situations. But, for the most part, they've been keeping them clean. I feel like as a former quarterback, most of the time when pressure does eventually get to Kevin or Preston, a lot of it is maybe holding the ball too long or not having the opportunity to get rid of it early in some of those situations. So I think the offensive line and pass pro has been really good. I think the PFF grades have backed that up. The run game was an adventure in game 1. Game 2 is much, much better. But these quarterbacks, they've got things going in the right direction. Preston finished the Nevada game exceptionally strong. Kevin came in against Houston Christian and got a ton of time and really looked the part. Keldrick did his part at bringing a physical edge in the run game. This quarterback situation that SMU has now that the Power 4 games are here, this type of a game just builds these guys' confidences up when they're going to need it here in a big stretch.
For sure. My early games in college, my freshman year, my first meaningful playing time was against Stephen F. Austin. So this is a great opportunity for guys to go out, kind of be able to work their craft a little bit against a little bit of lower level of competition and to gain some confidence. I thought Kevin was really fun to watch. He created a ton of plays in scramble drill where he's running around, and he's able to find an open receiver or he's able to take off with his legs. The only thing I would like to see a little more of is I'd like to see him get 5 points of contact on the football, not stop running around with a little bit like a loaf of bread. But it was really fun to watch him, man. He has so much upside. That's just awesome to see. I thought Preston did a nice job of bouncing back. I think his first series kind of had everybody a little bit shaken He threw behind the receiver on the first play, and then he airmailed one on third down where you could kind of feel everybody getting a little antsy on the sidelines and in the stands. But once he got his first completion in that second series, he got rolling. I thought he played really well overall. He threw a pair of touchdown passes, and he looked more comfortable than he did a week ago. He'll continue to be the starter, in my opinion, and Coach Lashley said it until proven otherwise. So you just have to roll with a guy that you've trusted for the last year plus to go out and get the job done. And the beauty of it is the second that he's having an off game or he just doesn't have it that night, we're able to go to Kevin Jennings and stick him in there. And I talked to people close to Kevin on the Boulevard on Saturday, and I asked him about his mindset with all of this. And they had spoken to him on Friday night, and he said, as long as the team wins, he's happy, which is pretty much what I had anticipated. That's what we talked about in the very first episode of this, knowing that that's the kind of character that Kevin is.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. And I go back to, sock coaches that I know, and I went out there in fall camp for them when they were getting ready to start the post Kevin Jennings era. And they were like, we have a lot of work to do because we just gave him the offense and said, you do what you do best. He was basically calling the plays. He was doing all these things, and he was doing it in a way that just set themselves up to win. Some games Kevin Jennings was an absolute star. You could see why he was lightly recruited by colleges and things like that. And then other games he was able to get the balls in playmakers' hands and just move them up and down the field, and Sock, won a state championship, their first in, decades for Dallas and Sock. So, he's just calm, cool, collected. I think now that the season has started and we've gone through this off season of, all right, Preston was recovering. Kevin got the reps in the spring. They continue to compete all off season. This is just about winning games and helping this team be in the best position that it can be. And in my opinion, at least, like people always bring up, man, this rotating thing, somebody's going to get mad at some point. I think if it were to be unfair in some way, we would hear at least rumblings, and we might not say anything, but you can hear the rumblings when there's division with something like this. It's being handled pretty well, I think, on all fronts.
I agree. I think it's a very balanced deal. I think they both just have a lot of character and respect for each other and for the program. They both want what's best for the team. And at the end of the day, that's winning ball games. I think Kevin can respect that Preston has cut his teeth, being a backup, and he's finally earned a starting role, and that this is his team until proven otherwise. But I also think that Preston can respect what Kevin brings to the table. He's a guy that is a raw athlete and is able to create a lot of plays. And it's never a bad thing to have a great backup quarterback. You're able to, if Preston were to go down again, where that's okay, we can lean on Kevin and be fine. And on the flip side of it, as long as Preston's playing great, Kevin will be happy too.
Yeah, I agree. It's one of those interesting things that I don't know how much longer rotating goes on, and I guess we could spend a whole pod like thinking about that or all the different reasons. But Preston's really strong in practice. I think Kevin is a gamer, and that's kind of where it's the hard line to walk. When you have two quarterbacks that do different things, and then they do their own different things well. You're looking for separation in different areas because it's a coach's job to get the best guys on the field. And there are certain areas where Preston does better and Kevin does better. And it's, right now it's working, and we'll see. We'll talk about it, with regard to BYU later this week. But against Houston Christian, it worked out really well. I thought both guys were efficient, especially once Preston settled in, like you said. But, Kevin had some miraculous plays. And Isaiah Smith, he met with the media on Tuesday. And I thought his explanation, he was asked about, jumping up a level, and you can kind of apply it to everything. You still got to go out there and execute. You got to play fast. You got to play smart. You got to do all of those things. And there are certain games where you're going to face a higher level of competition and talent, but you still got to go out there and make plays out there. And that's what Kevin did a lot of on Saturday.
For sure. Super excited to see that.
We got the debut of some of the young, talented freshmen. Let's go to Graham Uter. I want to lead off with him first. and you have the notes on this. Good comparison for SMU fans. Branson Hickman was a very good center for SMU for a long, long time. And I thought Graham played with that type of an edge that Branson played with, and kind of similar to what I saw from Savion Byrd earlier in the game.
Yeah, I got Branson in 2020 as a baby freshman, so I'm able to compare direct freshman to freshman and love Branson, praying for him. I know he went down with a injury in the first game for OU this past weekend, but I thought Graham looked really impressive, man. He looked comfortable out there, and it is really hard to play center as a true freshman. I played guard my freshman year. I carried a little bit of center snaps, but overall, it's just a lot less mental effort playing guard. But I thought Graham did a nice job communicating. You could see him talking to the guys next to him. He was able to get the guys on the right page late in the game. And I thought he did a really nice job. He looked like he's able to play with good leverage because he is a taller center, it looks like. Branson is probably 6 foot, 6'1", 2, maybe, if he's listening to this. Sorry, bro. But Graham is a little bit taller, which means he has to bend his knees, bend his hips a little bit more, get under guys, when you play your shorter, squattier defensive tackle bodies. And I thought he did a good job of playing underneath his pads, staying in the chute and able to raise these defensive tackles up and run his feet that way. Andrew Chambly was another one that I was impressed with, in his SMU debut. Even though he's an all-SEC freshman guy, it's different league, different offensive line coach, so we'll see how that progresses. But he reminds me of another SMU offensive lineman that just left, and I'm, of course, talking about Marcus Bryant, which the departure of those two guys, I think, worried a lot of people this offseason because we were losing what some people saw were two of our best offensive linemen. And frankly, I think we've upgraded. I think Andrew is a little bit thicker than Marcus. He's more explosive out of his pass sets. You can see that. Marcus's benefit is that he's 6'8" and just has these really long arms. He's able to reach out and grab people. But what's really fun about Andrew is watching him get out of his set, beat guys to the spot. He's able to really throw his hands in there and shut down the rush. The one coaching point I would give Andrew for this past week is he needs to keep the door shut. If he's playing right tackle, he needs to stay a little more square, not open that right hip as much, because a better rusher, like we're going to see this coming week, is going to be able to turn the corner and get home if he opens that hip. If he's able to stay square as long as possible and then at the very last second open up and throw his hands, he'll have a lot more success.
BYU, we'll talk about that later this week, but they do have some defensive ends that could really go. And another freshman that got out there on offense, and then we will talk a little defense, Derek McFall, I thought was excellent. And you had a little crossover with Braden West, who I kind of think maybe that's the comp there for Derek McFall, just his ability to catch the ball, his speed. I think they're kind of similar in that way. I think Braden was maybe a little bit more agile side to side, but I mean, you're probably splitting hairs there.
Yeah, a young Braden West, a young Ulysses Bentley. I think maybe a mix of the both. I was talking to Cam. We sat together at the game, and I was like, man, who's this cat? Because his second carry of his career, he was able to run for a touchdown. Super happy for him. Looks to be a great start for an SMU career for Derek, and I'm excited to see more of him going forward.
SMU did have some sloppiness in the middle of that second quarter. That could kind of happen as things get out of hand, I feel like. And then, that swinging gate, I'm with you. We talked about it before. A little bit of time to spend on it for the other team, but also you've given it away. I mean, there's always that line to walk. I mean, when they put something in like the swinging gate, take us through that. Is that like, all right, everybody, we're going to spread out. You're going to go here, you're going to go here, and we're going to run Keldrick to the right, and it's going to be a little out route, and that's it,
So you'll install your swinging gate early. Typically it's training camp or the first week of the season. You'll install it. They'll tell all the offensive linemen where to go, and then you have multiple plays built off of it. So that's not our only swinging gate play. I can guarantee that, even though I'm not in the building. We're going to have more plays off of that. I just thought it was a little bit of odd timing. It was the first touchdown of the game in a game that you should win big, and we run out for swinging gate and don't end up getting it. So not only did we not get the 2-point conversion, we also gave away one of our swinging gate plays, which if you weren't planning on running that one later in the year, okay, I can buy that because it forces teams now to spend 10, 15 minutes a week scouting, hey, SMU ran the swinging gate against Houston Christian. We need to be ready for it. So when you only have limited practice time due to NCAA rules, the CARA rules, it just adds another layer of something you have to squeeze into your 20 hours a week to prepare for. So I think if Coach Lashley is playing that level, he's playing chess, not checkers. So everybody else is now having to scout that. But it was just a little bit of odd timing for me.
I do agree with you on the odd timing, and that got lost in the discussion, I think, on the board because maybe everybody was just sitting back and saying, all right, this is going to be a, absolute, dominant win, but you didn't know that at the time. And who knows, it could have let, Houston Christian get a little confidence or whatever. But defensively, 157 total yards allowed. A lot of that, or not a lot of that, I guess relative to the overall course of the game, a good bit of that was the first drive where they get 25 yards or so down the field, couple first downs. But, the defense settled in. I felt like the pass rushers were on point. And they've got some confidence. You can see the vision of the defensive line when SMU faces a drop back passer. They're going to be able to tee off on that.
No doubt. I thought it was really awesome seeing Jafari Harvey get that huge sack, that led to the scoop and score by Tank. Second week in a row that Tank has really impressed me. I also thought when they weren't able to get home, I saw Corey Robinson get his hands up for a pass deflection, which almost led to an interception. And for a defensive lineman, people think that's a very complicated thing. If you're not going to get home, jump. It's an art. You really have to read the quarterback. And then as an offensive lineman, you're taught if they jump, you better dump them. You dump them or pull them down. So they're having to really time it where they can't show it too early. So that was cool to see. I think Harrison Hunt, I think he's another really solid defensive tackle for us. It's really nice to have a great stable of defensive tackles that you can send any of them out there and that we're going to be able to go out and win. And that's a credit to Coach Thibodeau. He's done a really great job with this defensive line room. He was a huge get for us coming over from Oklahoma. And I'm really happy to see how that's paid off for us.
Yeah, I had a couple groomsmen in my wedding that either diehard OU fans or went to OU. And when SMU hired Calvin Thibodeau, he was like, look, I know we're bringing Venables guy in and, he's one of the better defensive line coaches in the country, but we're really going to miss him. And so that always says a lot when an opposing fan base is either happy or sad that a coach is leaving for the next stop. It can tell a lot sometimes. But, Hayden, I don't know how long you've actually been listening to the pod before you've now joined it, but this is an Alex Kilgore and Isaiah Smith podcast. We've been on them since high school and both continue to impress this year.
Hell yeah, man. Alex Kilgore, another Katy guy. He went to Payto. I went to Katy High School. He had 6 tackles, co-lead for the game, probably didn't play at all in the second half. It was one of those deals where it's exciting to watch him go to work at that inside linebacker spot. And then Isaiah Smith, his sack was really fun for me to watch. I watched the TV copy again of the game last night, and I was really able to slow it down. He did a really nice job of showing speed, showing that up the field speed rush. The tackle opened his hips, and he transitioned that into a bull rush. That is really hard to stop. Going back to what I was talking about Chambly, when you open your hips and then get bulled, you have no power. So it's really hard to make that adjustment. And then Isaiah Smith added a tackle for loss on top of that. So really piling up the stats a little bit. It was a second sack of the season after having one in that last drive against Nevada. So really fun watching those two go to work this past week.
Did you know Katy Payto didn't open until you were already at SMU?
I did know that.
Sorry, buddy. A big positive as well for SMU was, look, you're getting that type of contribution from Alex Kilgore. It has to make Ahmad Walker better. Kobe Wilson, who co-led the team in tackles for that game. I saw Ahmad mix it up first series. There was a run along the sideline, and he went right at it, after that one. So, Houston Christian didn't come in, backing down from anything, as, evidenced by the first series on each side of the ball for them. But, eventually you have this depth that was able to take over defensively for SMU. I think it really, wore them down, and eventually they played other quarterbacks, and it obviously was out of hand, but also Ahmad Moses got an interception. So that's always good to see as well, get the secondary involved and some confidence there.
Yeah. And it gives credit to our team, that we were able to go out and shut that down and put that game away early. I mean, you look at Texas Tech, which we'll get to in a little bit. They were in a dogfight with Abilene Christian all the way to the end. I'm sure they didn't anticipate that, just like we didn't anticipate this game being close. But, that just speaks to us how we were able to go out there, take care of business, put the game away early, and then get out of there with the win.
Last thing on the game, you've got your MVP of this one, and go with Ja'Kai Clark, or do you have anything else before you talk about Ja'Kai?
I was going to add a little more learning experience for the defense, just some things that I noticed. I think that defensive line at end spot, we were rushing past the quarterback at times. I think that's going to open up running lanes for later in the year when we play more running quarterbacks. Houston Christian was a really bad offense and a really bad football team. Unfortunately, that's what they put on tape out there. You can only judge by what they've put on tape. And so far in 2024, they looked very poor. So the third group was in at the end. HCU still couldn't gain yards on them. So I don't want to pat ourselves on the back too early here with what we just put out there. And then Elijah Roberts, he hadn't gotten home yet on a sack this year. I think Coach Lashley talked a little bit about it. And so what I'll relate it to, it was like when Barry Bonds wouldn't get pitched to. So they're running away from him. They're giving him tight end chips, running back chips. He's a great player. I'm watching him in his one-on-ones. He is winning his one-on-one reps. But when you're putting two guys on him or you're getting the ball out quick, it's hard for him to get home. It'll all eventually balance out with how this defensive line is putting up serious production, and they'll have to start double teaming elsewhere or they'll figure something out, and he will get his one-on-one matchups again. And then finally, SMU was, again, the most penalized team of the game, second week in a row. They had 6 penalties for 45 yards compared to 5 penalties for, I think it was 35 by Houston Christian. We can still clean that up. A lot better than it was last week, but there still is things that need to be cleaned up. And then, man, you stole my thunder. Ja'Kai Clark was my
I messed that up. Bad.
I thought he did a really nice job with the sudden change, going from guard back into center and getting everyone on the right page. There were no obvious busted assignments. We were on the right guys, going in the right direction. It adds such a huge mental strain to the week. Having to get your extra film in for center and guard. And Ja'Kai just handled that really well. It was almost Booker for the second consecutive week. I almost gave it to Tank again because, again, he's really impressed me to start the year, and he's been a great addition to this already talented defensive line room. And then my last little closing bit, energy is success for this team. The more that this team is able to build on that and come out and be the most excited team to play every week, that's going to speak wonders to how they're going to play the rest of this year. Now, excitement without being tight, that's the sweet spot. You can't be so overhyped in a rivalry game or a big road game to where you're just tight and you can't play. You still have to be loose. So there is a balance to that. But really excited. Congrats, Ja'Kai, MVP for week 1 win against Houston Christian.
I want to pick your brain a little bit on those two things before we go into the coast to coast. Sorry. But I feel like you have the just right maybe take or inside combination of what you've seen, heard, and then been through. But Ja'Kai came in so overweight last year, and it was disappointing because he had started 40 games in Miami. Can you speak to the work that he had to put in? I know you had already moved on and and things like that, but you did get to see him in the process of dropping that weight a little bit too.
When you're as big as he was, which I don't have an exact number on it. I mean, it was north of 340. I know that it was too big to play for us, especially with how fast we go and the tempo that we're trying to keep. So Ja'Kai is having to go through these off-season workouts, and he's really straining. And on top of that, he's having to really cut his diet down to where at times it's straight up painful and just hard to work out on such a caloric deficit, to where he's had to really commit and commit his body and his eating habits to be able to slim down to where he's at. Now, everybody has a sweet spot weight. There were times where I was too fat at SMU, where I was too heavy for my own good, and I had to cut down a little bit to be a better player. And everybody has that zone. For me, it was between 300 and 303. I played a game at 310 and was too big and had to come back down. Ja'Kai, he's a naturally bigger body than I am, so I'm not sure where he's at right now. I've heard around 320, but that's a great weight for him from what I've seen. He's done a great job. I think that feels slim for him after coming down from whatever he was.
And then the energy and positively, and Rhett kind of talked about this with, playing too emotional at Nevada instead of with passion. That probably adds up to that. Do you think there are times when this team, for whatever reason, like maybe, TCU last year is an example, maybe a little too tight, wound up instead of just going out and playing? And Rhett kind of said that today. He was like, we should be the underdogs, which, coach speak on that, whatever, but they just need to relax. And I'm
TCU the
sure it's
last
hard to
2
do.
years. Yeah, TCU the last 2 years, Oklahoma last year. It looked like we went out there so tight because it is such a big game. And we'll talk about that more of TCU week. But one of the keys for that week is just relax, man. At the end of the day, I know it's a huge rivalry. I know we hate them, the departure, everything else you want to talk about, but it's another football game at the end of the day. You don't need to do anything extra or special to go out and win that football game. You just need to execute at a high level and do it the way that you already have been that season and this season and in the future. If they go out and execute at a high level, there's no reason that this team should lose a ball game. I mean, that's really where we're at. We have the talent, we have the coaching, we have everything we need to be successful. We just need to be able to go out and execute, stay focused, and keep mental errors to a minimum.
We'll find out. 6 p.m. Central, ESPN2, Friday night in Ford Stadium. BYU, SMU looks to move to 3-0. We'll talk about that later this week on the Pony Express podcast. But first, Hayden, before we go, a lot of people probably thought about FSU, what you just said, that they had all the talent. They just didn't need to beat themselves and things like that. Let's lead off there with the coast to coast. It just kind of looks like just a football team that is lost right now.
Obliterated last night, physically, emotionally, mentally. Obviously still hungover from that trip to Ireland. Maybe not in an alcohol standpoint, but as far as
might have needed it after
seriously, man, if I was a Florida State fan, I needed a drink. But after that game, obviously super emotional, long trip in Ireland, and then to just get embarrassed in Tallahassee like that. I thought Mike Norvell would do a much better job of getting them ready to play. And unfortunately, they're not ready to compete at a high level, at least not yet this year. I do hope that they find a way to turn it around so it'll end up looking better when we hopefully end up beating them at the end of this month. But we'll see. It's definitely kind of a question mark for college football right now. It looks like getting left out of the playoff has just murdered that program for right now.
And DJ Uyunglele, I watched him for years from high school to Clemson to Oregon State to now Florida State. And it was the downfield passing was talked about when they lost to Georgia Tech. He was missing open guys against Boston College. I mean, I don't know. They might need to make a quarterback change. And it's hard to pull the plug on a guy that, left his prior program where he was starting, where he had success. And, I'm sure there's NIL involved and things like that. But at the end of the day, I mean, you're already out of it. So you got to go on a heater the rest of the way. You got to win out to even have a chance. And your current quarterback is just not able to get it done.
It's weird, man. Usually guys are going to get a lot better in their college career. DJ is one of those guys that you've looked at. He's just gotten worse. And I'm not sure why that is or if there's any kind of mental block there for him. And I'm sure his confidence is at an all-time low with how he's played the last couple weeks. But unfortunately, like we've talked about with our quarterback situation, you got to put the guy out there that's going to give you the best chance to win. I understand that DJ is probably making a lot of money NIL-wise, and there's been a lot of investment to get him to Florida State. But if you want to win some ball games, you got to start looking in another direction going forward. So, but speaking of quarterbacks, I thought Shedeur Sanders played like a Heisman quarterback in the Colorado Buffaloes win against North Dakota State. He played like a Heisman winner. Travis Hunter played like a Heisman winner. Unfortunately, I just don't see Colorado being any kind of contender this year. I still think they're underpowered up front. I know they signed the number one left tackle in high school recruiting. I just don't see it. I think Shedeur was on his back too much. He was getting knocked around a little bit. And now North Dakota State is an excellent FCS program. Multiple national championships in the last 10 years. It's the program you think of when you think of FCS powerhouse. But we'll see what happens with Colorado. They obviously have a ton of athletes. And then I like what Dion has done as far as building a culture of accountability with that program. I just think there's a lot of hype built around it, which probably doesn't have much footing, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm with you. I didn't get a chance to watch that game, but I did watch some Travis Hunter highlights, and he's not only playing like a Heisman Trophy candidate winner. He's playing like a number 1 overall draft pick. I mean, he's just an absolute stud in every way. And I remember watching on National Signing Day as the drama unfolded, and he was going to end up at Colorado, or I guess end up at Jackson State. And little did everybody realize, hey, he is that good of a football player that he can make it work there, and then he can make it work anywhere. So you got a guy like that. He's kind of a cheat code.
He's so talented, and then on top of that, he's playing 130 snaps a game.
Yeah.
The most we played at Arkansas State, first game of the year in 2019, Shane Buechele's opening game, and Jalen Thomas and I played 109 snaps, and I didn't think I'd be able to play for a month.
How, I mean, wow. I didn't realize there were that many snaps in that game. That was, wow.
That was brutal.
I feel for you. I hurt just thinking about it. Speaking of good quarterback play, Dylan Gabriel did rack up some yardage, but that Oregon 24-14 win over Idaho, I mean, is that a product of maybe what SMU might have maybe faced a little bit the week prior, like just kind of, sitting on your press clippings and kind of being, feeling like you're Oregon and you're going to roll Idaho and things like that? I know Nevada's better, obviously, than what, we all thought maybe week 0, but there's still some of that too.
Yeah, that was exactly what I was going to tie it to. We talked about it in that post week 0 pod, how hard it is to win, that first game of the year. I know Oregon was at home and, they didn't have to go on the road or anything like that. And Idaho, you would think a top 5 Oregon team would just blow out early and get their guys out. Dylan Gabriel had a bunch of yards, 41 for 49, 380 yards, 2 touchdowns. A lot of that was, some checkdowns that turned into big receivers gains. But at the end of the day, stats are stats. I thought he did a nice job. He played well enough to win, and they were able to win. I just think by 10 was a little surprising for a team that some people are predicting as a national champion this year. But it's week 1. It's early. I predict they'll get rolling. But speaking of close games, UCLA and Hawaii, that was
in the
one.
Big Ten.
Yeah. First game in the Big Ten, go to Hawaii. That is one that I tie more to the Nevada game. Going on the road, man. I mean, Hawaii also, your body just goes into vacation mode as soon as the plane lands. So maybe that explains that 16-13 win for them.
And a far, far cry from Hawaii is Lubbock, Texas. And Texas Tech, in their first game in their new end zone, had to survive a 2-point conversion, go for the win in overtime, and Abilene Christian fell by 1.
I want to give a shout out to the Wildcats, man. My brother plays for them. During that fourth quarter where the game was put away for SMU, I had the Texas Tech game on my phone. And as soon as they scored that tying touchdown in overtime, I said, you got to go for 2 here. Unfortunately, Abilene Christian, I knew at some point they weren't going to be able to keep up with just the talent of Texas Tech. So you're on the road. You got paid to be there. You might as well go for 2 to try to win the game there. I hope it springboards their season. I would love to see Abilene Christian come a long way and win a lot of games this year, but very concerning for Texas Tech and Joey McGuire over there. Definitely thought that they would look a little better here. And now that Joey McGuire's been there and they've kind of established a culture, did not anticipate that.
I'm a Joey McGuire guy. Like I don't know if it's going to work out, judging on what we've seen the last couple of years, even like you said, the culture's now in place and all of that. They've been recruiting at a fairly high level, but it hasn't broken through yet. This is the year it has to for him, but he's a heck of a guy. I really hope it works out for him. Just, SMU can, stay above the Texas Techs of the world though. But speaking of another nail biter, but one that, I don't know how to feel. Like I kind of felt like TCU Stanford, I was expecting it to be close. Like I love what Troy Taylor's doing at Stanford, but if you're a Frogs fan, you would have expected, hey, you coming off a poor season, bounce back in the right way with a strong showing week 1, and they got by.
For sure. All the TCU people I know are chalking up last season to a little bit of a national championship appearance hangover. So they were anticipating blowing out a Stanford team that this is the first year Stanford has had a full scholarship load in 9 years. So Stanford has come a long ways. They've gotten a lot better, but TCU started so slow and then they looked poor in the red zone. Multiple overthrows, not even giving your receivers a chance. And then unfortunately, if this TCU season goes to pieces, I'm not sure how much longer Sonny is going to have there. I mean, I think it's one of those deals where you go to the national championship in your first year. All right, that's the expectation, that we're going to be competing for a national championship. And then to go 5-7, miss a bowl game, and then to barely beat a subpar Stanford team that is probably going to finish bottom 5 in the ACC this year, that is concerning for the Frogs. I will say their silver lining is their wide receiver, Savion Williams. I thought he looked really good. That's going to be a key point to watch when we play them in a few weeks. We're going to have to play really well against him.
Not to mention on TCU side of things with Sonny, like hiring Kendall Briles, a lot of political capital there. Andy Avalos is one of the guys that isn't relatively well liked in coaching circles from what I hear, but I got roasted online by TCU fans when I said if they miss a bowl game, he'll be on the hot seat, but I don't know what else to call it if you miss a bowl game 2 years in a row.
Questionable hires, kind of a questionable culture now. I mean, I thought I knew what that culture looked like after living it for 4 years, but that does not look like the culture we had in place in 2019, and 2020. I mean, Sonny's second year at SMU was his best. Sonny's second year at TCU has been his worst so far. We'll see where they go from here.
And then a couple others to hit on. Let's stay in Texas, and then we'll go to a complete beatdown. Well, I guess they were both beatdowns, but Houston embarrassed by UNLV. We talked about this before the pod. I'm a Willie Fritz guy. I think I chalked this one up in part to a major culture overhaul, but a lot of, I mean, that one didn't seem right.
I'm a Willie Fritz fan. My dad played at Sam Houston State. Willie Fritz was coaching there in the 90s, so I became a Willie Fritz fan when he was at Sam Houston and then at Tulane. I always found a way to find him after the games, which I was undefeated against Tulane in my time at SMU. So it was more fun for me than it was for him. But yeah, total culture overhaul, like you said, it's completely different. They're having to rip out what was remainder of really the Tom Herman, because I don't feel like they ever reset after that. I feel like it just kind of kept getting kicked down the road to the next coach. And finally, I think Willie has said enough is enough, and they're trying to totally reset. So U of H, unfortunately, right now, it looks like they're more of a basketball school for the time being, but we'll see what happens going down the stretch.
And then lastly, Georgia Clemson. Pertinent because SMU is in the ACC. They don't have to face Clemson, but is Clemson – I think Clemson's still going to be a factor in the ACC this year. I think it's Georgia being that good. I think Clemson's defense is excellent. It is a really good group.
Their defense is really great. Offensively, it was a really poor showing. Garrett Riley's the offensive coordinator over there, was a coach for me at SMU, and then he went to TCU, and now he's at Clemson. Unfortunately, I think the sun is setting on Clemson football. I think this is going to be one of their last runs to try to make it to the playoff and get back to where they were. I just think Dabo Swinney has fallen behind the times of college football. One of 4 programs to sign 0 transfer portal players. It's Clemson, Army, Navy, and Air Force. So you have the 3 service academies and then a school trying to compete for a national championship. Not sustainable. In this era, you got to get with the times or you're going to get left behind. Scoring 3 points on offense as the number 14 team in the country, abysmal. Yes, your defense played great. Yes, Georgia is a great team, going to be competing for a national championship again this year. But at the end of the day, an unacceptable showing.
Yeah, we'll see. It's interesting. We'll close out with this. Clemson, Florida State. Not carrying the weight for the ACC so far this year.
No, sir.
Well, Hayden, this has been awesome. A fun edition. We're going to start doing this. I think we're going to break it up into 2 as we'll be burning the midnight oil, so to speak, to get 2 of them out. But it's a lot of fun talking ball, and we really hope everybody is enjoying it. And we'll be back later this week to answer the questions from our On the Pony Express subscribers that you started on the thread.
Yes, sir. Start post them on the thread. I'll try to get to as many as I can. The ones where people are having fun and posting pictures and stuff, I'll have to try to answer actually on the thread. But if you give me a great question about offensive line play or college football or the NFL in general, I'll do my best to answer all the ones I can.
Cool. Well, for Hayden Howerton, I'm Billy Embody. Thanks for listening to this edition of the On the Pony Express podcast. We will catch you guys later this week as we'll preview BYU with Hayden and break it all down ahead of Friday night's matchup with the Cougars, 6 p.m. Central, ESPN2 in Ford Stadium. For Hayden Howerton, I'm Billy Embody. Thanks for listening to this edition of the On the Pony Express podcast.
Thanks for listening to the On the Pony Express podcast with Billy Embody. Follow us on your socials on X at SMU on 3 and on Instagram at on3SMU. And keep it locked to ontheponyexpress.com for more coverage.